Meredith, thank you so much for facilitating the webinar today and providing the background information and for facilitating the questions as well.
Absolutely. I love doing these with you, Dennis. It's really nice to hear your experience from all of your work with churches over the past decades, not to rub it in, but you do have certainly a lot of experience. And so I'm grateful to help share that with the people that follow us.
Well, this is the one benefit of being old, having lots of experience.
And looking forward to that.
The older I get, the less time I spend on my hair. That's another big benefit.
I'll certainly look forward to that someday.
right, as well.
Well, just as we're getting people joined in here, I see some people getting logged in. So welcome everyone to our webinar today, talking about setting the stage for a fall church capital campaign. This is a topic we've been getting a lot of questions about as things are opening back up with the vaccine and everything with COVID kind of slowly moving forward. Very, very grateful to have that being the case. But a lot of people have been kind of in a waiting period and a holding period in the past year and a half because of this, in desperate need of extra funds and facility updates and financial support to help run their audio visual needs that are new with doing remote worship services and things like that. So certainly the need is high, and we're happy to be able to share what we've learned over the past year and a half and the past 30 years, really, with Dennis and his work with churches and church capital campaigns all over the country and lots of different denominations, and to share stories of success and failure, of things that we've learned from what we've done wrong as well. That's probably equally as important as our successes. So welcome. And just a little introduction into church development as we get started. And please feel free to share this webinar, and the slides will be available on our website, or you can email our office at church@church-development, or call Dennis for additional support. We are recording this, and our recordings are available on our YouTube channel, and we'll send the link out to everyone who was registered for the webinar, so you can get that and share it with anybody who you think it might be of help to, whether they're preparing for a church capital campaign in a parish or a congregation, or a diocesan level, or a denominational leader who might be able to share that with other people in their area as well. We just really want to get the word out about everything that we've learned. So there are some ways to get access to how you can do that. Church Development is sponsoring the webinar today, and we're going to talk about some ways to really engage your members in preparation for this fall campaign. Engagement is really, really key to having a successful financial and spiritual outcome to any kind of fundraising project, but particularly with capital campaigns, we need a built consensus about what the vision is that we're looking for. And so Dennis is going to share some practical ideas about how to build that consensus, identifying major donors for targeting with outreach, and then planning through a feasibility study and developing your campaign plan. So he'll get into talking more about what goes into those things. But right now, we'd love you to chime in with some feedback about what you'd like us to focus on in this particular webinar. If you have any specific questions or concerns that you're dealing with in your local congregation, we would love to speak into those. And so just go ahead and submit them in the chat now, and we'll address some of them. And then also, if you're planning on having a capital campaign in your church in the next period of time, let us know what your timeline looks like for that, because that could also too help us kind of tailor content of this webinar to what you guys are looking for in terms of, what's this timeline looking like here? Are we trying to get this done within this year? Are we looking at in the fall, like the topic of this webinar? Are we looking at a little bit longer than that? So we'd love to really kind of tailor this content to you. And so go ahead and chime in now in the chat with what is going on in your church or parish. and we'll address that. So church development was founded in 1992 by Dennis Green, who's our presenter today. We have raised over $200 million in over 200 church capital campaigns, and many more millions of dollars in annual stewardship programs through our work in church capital campaigns, but then also additionally, we are pretty different from other capital campaign consultant firms in that our approach is really based in prayer and community building and consensus decision making, rather than kind of pressuring people and giving some kind of guilt message about giving to the church or the parish. It's really tempting to do that, but we found that it's not very successful, and we found a lot of better ways to engage people in the process of becoming a steward. So our work in church capital campaigns continues for 3 years after our project ends, and we really try to build this culture based on the scripture passage, 1 Peter 4:10, that says, like good stewards of the manifold grace of God, serve one another with whatever gift each of you has received. So that's the stewardship mindset that we try to foster in the churches that we work with in our church capital campaigns. And we found that that really builds a good foundation for a successful campaign. Just introducing our presenter here, Dennis Green today is the founder and president of Church Development. He has over 30 years experience in organizational development and working in churches particularly. He's a father, a husband, cancer survivor. He's got amazing stories. He's written a couple books, and he's been involved in some cognitive research that's been published in an academic journal. So he kind of approaches things from a research and experience perspective, which we find to be really helpful. So go ahead and take it away, Dennis. Thanks for your presentation today.
Meredith, thanks very much. I appreciate that. And thank you also for tracking the questions that come in through the chat box. And please do feel free to interrupt me as we go. We plan about 35 minutes of content to deliver to you. And as Meredith said, you can access it at any point in time. Plus, we spend about a fourth of our professional lives giving away information. And it is a pleasure to do that. That's how we make friends. And it's really a pleasant business to be in. Most people don't like anything to do with fundraising. I found it to be very joyful. I conceive of it as really that top part of Maslow's hierarchy of needs talks about self-actualization. And I see what we do as really facilitating the implementation of one's values. I have a friend, and we don't have a financial relationship, but Jennifer Gutierrez, the president of JAG Consulting, who has been doing visioning facilitation for churches and denominational leaders for more than 20 years. Her thought is good, engaged visioning makes fundraising superfluous. Her experience is that when there's consensus on where we're headed and how we're going to get there, generosity unfolds. And I have to agree with her. I have a good fortune to interact with a lot of professionals in the field, and I feel like we can give away information and connect churches to those other experts as needed, and they like giving away information too. So it's a fun business to be in. It's how I met my wife and lots of friends. But we have a lot of data too. Beyond the soft parts, we have a lot of hard data that we've collected over many decades. My first church work was in 1983. And I know you think, oh, that's when he was born. No, but thank you for thinking that. I've collected data all along the way, and actually the numbers a little bit higher than this. And the stewardship system book we will give you for free. We'll also give you our church capital campaign book, just so you can get a sense of what have other churches done, what does success look like, and perhaps more importantly, following that guidance from that great American philosopher, Chuck Norris, who said, the key to success is to figure out what doesn't work, then don't do that. So we try to follow that as well. So we do a lot of failure analysis, both failures that we have been part of and failures that others have been part of, just to streamline the process and make things go a little quicker. I'm a big fan of taking everything possible from the secular world and sharing it with the church world, and also the scientific world. One of my favorite resources is Daniel Kahneman, who got a Nobel Prize for writing the book Thinking Fast and Slow. It really helped me better understand from an organizational development perspective how groups of people make decisions, how individuals make decisions. And it really changed the way we conduct church capital campaigns. So we do a ton of research. We keep track. We're part of these professional associations listed under number 5 there, the International Catholic Stewardship Council, the National Association of Church Business Administrators, which is now called the Church Network. And the sheer amount of data that we process, really, we want to be a funnel to help your jobs. I don't know about easier, but perhaps more successful. I have a particular affinity for denominational leaders, diocesan leaders of stewardship who want to support and connect their congregations with successful systems. So we try to give away a lot of resources that they can then disperse to their folks. They will be more successful with the significant amount of resources that we can share. So our agenda today, and we'll move pretty fast. So please interrupt with your questions. We'll talk about stewardship inspiration, about the visioning process, identifying major donors, what's a feasibility study look like, and what does a capital campaign look like as well. Now, just to inspire you, our norm is to raise 300% or more of a church's annual giving in 3-year pledges. Just recently, we had a church raise 700% of annual giving in 3-year pledges. We've had many that have raised 500% of annual giving. So a lot of people ask, how the heck do you do that? Is it a high pressure circumstance? And no, it's not. Really, for instance, part of the research that we really respect came out of Gallup polling, and the instrument's called ME25, stands for Member Engagement 25. And they discovered that the average church only has about 15% of their people deeply engaged. They've got about 50% in the middle and 35% that my wife lovingly calls CEOs, Christmas and Easter only. So the inner 15% we probably don't have to worry about. It's the outer 85%. How do we engage them? The Fidelity Fund did a study of high net worth individuals and their giving patterns in 2009, and they discovered that when an individual is involved as a volunteer, and it's the definition that they give themselves, I volunteered to help, then their giving is 11 times higher than a non-volunteer. So if that's all this webinar contained, you would have the tool to raise a lot of money. You would have to figure out ways to have meaningful engagement so the individual feels like a volunteer, because that's the one thing that seems to facilitate the significant step up in giving. Now, the other significant thing is the stewardship mindset. It is not a market-driven exchange of value for value. It is the discerning God's will in one's life. That is the key. So the way we raise the most amount of money is based both in science and in spirituality, and those things have got to go hand in hand. And when you do, you raise a lot of money, and annual giving goes up, and planned giving gets a significant boost as well. Frequently, we'll do follow-up with a capital campaign and institute a planned giving effort 12 months after a capital campaign. It doesn't cost anything extra, but we will usually raise the same amount of money in a planned giving effort as we did in a capital campaign. So you know something is working. And then pastoral leaders, church leaders tend to report morale has never been higher. Our sense of community has never been higher. And that's really the important thing. The role of church in society and in human development is just so critical, and we've got to bring our best game. And I am so highly motivated. I've got 4 kids. I want the church to be thriving when not only are they church shopping, which they will do when they're getting married or having children, I want it to be thriving when their grandchildren are in the midst of that. Now, we'll cover a lot of case studies. Here are some samples that we'll talk about. The multiple campaign question is one that's a very complex one, but I would like to open your thoughts that is conceivable to do more than one capital campaign. We ran the 7th capital campaign in 21 years for Pleasant Valley Baptist Church, and we raised 1.5 times annual giving. So you can still raise that. People complain about donor burnout. Should you proceed? That should be based in your feasibility study. You need to ask the question, should we proceed? Now, Meredith, are you about to ask me a question?
I am. We had a question come in here through the Q&A about some information that's on our website related to these case studies. I think this person saw these case studies listed on our website and mentioned that they had raised in their last campaign they had done on their own about 1.75 times annual giving. And they're just wondering why these numbers for St. Anne's and St. Augustine are so high, because they seem kind of, 700% basically. Is that real? So if you could just kind of speak into that as to
Well,
how that was possible,
sure.
I think that would help this person.
Well, thank you. And first of all, I would like to congratulate that person. If you raise 1.7 times annual giving in a campaign you ran yourself, that is a miracle. That is like a record. We keep track of every do-it-yourself campaign, every one. And we've got names and phone numbers and their ratio, that relationship of annual giving to the amount raised in the capital campaign. And the norm is to raise 50% of annual giving in 3-year pledges in a do-it-yourself campaign. Now, I liken it, I compare this, I have this mental image of Tom Hanks in the movie Castaway, where he has a dental problem and he has to remove a tooth by himself. It must have been the most painful thing imaginable, just horrifying. And that's how I envision a do-it-yourself capital campaign. A professionally well-run capital campaign, as I said earlier, should raise you 3 times annual giving, and then you add in on top of these numbers that are expressed here, the amount that you raise in your planned giving effort. And the differences are just so dramatic. And the reason why is the same reason that I have hired plumbers and electricians and working on my home. They tend to know the right thing to do and they do it very efficiently. And they save me from having to do it over and over again. So there's a great deal of science. I would encourage you, call me or email me, and I will give you this book. This is the Stewardship System. And it contains a whole lot of our research and statistics and case studies in there. And you can pick it apart and apply each one of those. If you're close to getting if you're close to doing a capital campaign right now, please call me. I will come give a sales pitch. It doesn't cost anything, but we will present a sales proposal that it's voluminous and it covers every possible thing that we would do for your church. And you would begin to get a sense of the kind of things that are required to make a successful capital campaign happen. And it doesn't cost anything either. And what we can also provide you is samples from other similar churches to your church. We've worked with every denomination over the past 30 years, and we can share with you what has worked for them and what has not worked as well. So good question. Keep those questions coming, which kind of relates to number 3 on your screen there. If you don't take a professional approach, the norm is to raise 50% of annual giving. And that's a far cry from the 3 times annual giving that is our norm. So just thinking ahead, what does it look like? So the first thing that I would recommend if you're preparing for a campaign this fall is begin stewardship inspiration. Okay, so the average Catholic gives 1.2% of their income to their church. The average Protestant gives 2.2% of their income to the church. Gallup Polling did an intensive analysis and survey related to giving comfort levels, presenting the idea of the tithe. And they found out that tithing is only embraced by 5% of the population. That means with 95% of us, we have room to grow. Okay. Now, what they also discovered was that the ceiling for comfort in giving is 5% of one's income. So even if you're in a Protestant church that has a very vigorous stewardship effort, it is conceivable that you could double giving and still not approach that ceiling in the comfort of giving. So what is the core motivation for generosity? And that is the stewardship mindset that Meredith mentioned earlier. It springs forth from 1 Peter 4:10. I myself was introduced that idea after a horrible experience I had at age 22. I took a 5-day float trip down the Congo River, ended up in Angola in a war zone by mistake with a gun to my head. They thought I was a participant in a civil war. It was the first time I ever prayed and meant it. Then I grew up Catholic and I went to a Baptist college. I knew a couple different ways to pray. But the prayer that came out of me was, "Dear God, into your hands I commend my soul." And that prayer changed me. That moment, that near-death experience changed me. It changed me spiritually and physically. Physically, that's the moment my hair started to fall out. So I have a reminder every single day. But also, it made me think, I'm in a relationship with God. How might I discern God's will in my life? That is the essential component of the stewardship mindset. The best way to communicate that is with lay speakers. I selected a photo for this of a generic gentleman who looks like me with no hair and middle age or older. So the 3-minute remarks at the end of worship services or on video will not be highly polished, but they will be genuine and authentic. And we suggest you do that monthly. Start today. Now, if you want a script, I'll give you a script. It's got 3 parts, which basically the person answers 3 questions. And I can send you that, and they're dynamic and they're lovely. As a matter of fact, we tend to measure their success by how much time people stick around in the foyer after worship services have concluded. We measure that with a stopwatch before, and then we measure with a stopwatch after. And we discovered the cohesiveness of a church actually increases because of this very effective storytelling. Now, this can be supported by number 1, 2, and 3, the bulletin, social media, scripture, and education about scripture, and 4 sermons on stewardship every year. This has got to be the beginning and the core, because we're all about the conversion of hearts. So that it's not, to counter the societal trend toward greed, a much more healthy attitude supported by secular research, like in the book Flourish or Flow. The height of healthy psychology is being a conduit for God's blessing. They will not use religious terms, but scientifically, they're describing our experience that we would have on a very spiritual basis. So this is step number 1 as you prepare for your fall church capital campaign. Begin today. Put it in the bulletin. Assign your pastor to speak on this 4 times per year, and every month get a cadre of individuals who tell their stewardship story. It'd be great if you could tell it at worship, but if you can't, do it on video and send it out. The next thing you've got to do, going back to my friend Jennifer Gutierrez, the vision expert, it's absolutely critical that everybody knows what's going on and they have an opportunity to give input. So have town hall meetings, have them today, announce them, because everybody's now comfortable with Zoom. You can do this on Zoom. You can have many, many hundreds of people on Zoom. And there are ways people can ask questions, and you can break into small groups on Zoom as well. And it's fast, and it costs literally nothing to implement that kind of technology. Now, you're going to have to pay something to a facilitator, but if you're about to raise millions of dollars, what you pay them is minuscule to the amount that you will raise. Now, if you do a SurveyMonkey survey, that again costs nothing, and you can create a 5 or 7 question survey. We just finished one. And the average response, we asked them the money question too, the average response was like $10,000 that they would consider giving. And this cost us nothing. And all of a sudden we have thousands and thousands of dollars that people express they're ready to give towards that vision. That tells us, oh my goodness, this really is real. People really do care about this. It's essential that you involve your leadership board, whether you call it a board of directors, or a parish council, or session, or vestry. They've got to be the leaders of the process. Think of your pastor as the CEO. The board has got to carry that vision forward. They've got to affirm it, announce it, and they've got to serve as lay speakers communicating that vision. They've got to listen, and they've got to communicate outward as well. So you've got to begin today, even if you've got a really clearly defined vision, you've got to really move towards communicating that and engaging people in it and talking about it as well. The next one really is borrowed from the secular world, the identification of major donor potential leadership givers. Now, this is a standard act in the secular world, and this is a brand new concept in the church world. And I want to share with you this. There's 2 parts of this slide. On the left, if you have a capital campaign for $1 million, the norm would be you have one donor who would give you 10% of the total, or $100,000. You would have 10 donors on the second level who give an average of $40,000, which is 4% of the total. You would have 100 donors give you 0.4%, which would add up to the same cumulative total amount as the level above that. And from these 111 donors, you would raise about 80% of all the funds that you raise. Now, this is an industry norm, and there are norms like this, whether it's basketball, football, building construction, every industry has norms. So I see Meredith's happy face. This must mean you're going to ask me a question. Fire away, Meredith.
I am just hoping that maybe you could speak to what can we learn about what this top donor strata means for timing of a church capital campaign right now and this year. And just if you could share some of the insights about where we are with the stock market and how this gift range chart helps us to understand the urgency of the situation that we're in right now.
Thank you. That's just really a great question. If you're going to do a capital campaign at any point in the near future, please do it right this minute. Start it right this second. Why? Because the Dow is at 34,000. 10 years ago, it was at 10,000. We have tripled. So the upper strata of wealth holders in our society, and the two pyramids on the right are a reflection of that wealth. Their wealth has tripled in the past 10 years. Since this is my profession, I am constantly reading and asking questions of experts. The consensus is at some point in the future, there might be a correction of the stock market. There might be. The current level of wealth held at the top strata in the dark blue and the light blue, you can see that corresponds on the right. You see a small portion of the population holds the lion's share of wealth. So my pragmatic advice is, please engage those potential leadership donors right this minute in your dialogue about the vision and your communication about stewardship. How do you do that? Ask them to be a lay speaker. Ask them to help communicate. If they don't want to stand up in front of church and speak, then let us make a video. It doesn't cost anything. We want a 15-second soundbite. You can record it on your phone and edit it, or it can be done through a Zoom meeting, which you record. So wealthy people are just like you and me. They just happen to have more money. It is not good form to surprise any donor with a request. So let us engage them early. I myself propose and suggest that you, the listener, in particular those diocesan and denominational leaders, please bring a bit of pragmatism to your advice, helping your congregations. You may retain firms that do donor research. The cost is very small, and it is publicly traded information. Just recently, my coworker, Daryl Prater, ran a spectacularly successful capital campaign, and it was the church's fourth capital campaign in a row. The campaign that was concluded 6 months before we began our campaign raised $2 million. We implemented the techniques that I'm talking about today. We raised $3.5 million. It's the same group of people, the same economy, the same everything, but we raised almost double the amount that was raised previously. And this is one of the ways that we did that. We did donor research, and we discovered that we had a member of the parish that had their name listed in a university that was very near the parish at giving at the $100,000 per year level. On the church rolls, we examined that same person and found they gave $100 per year. So sensing that there was a little bit of incongruity there, we thought perhaps we should engage that couple in the vision. And so to begin with, we held several events. We invited several people who fell into this category into a dialogue with the pastor about the vision. Small group events. It was the price of a sandwich and an hour of the pastor's time after church on Sunday. We did several of those. This couple was part of that. it was amazing how well it worked. That was on a Sunday. On Monday, they brought by a check for $100,000. And they said to the pastor, I know this because he called me. He said, Dennis, you won't believe us. They brought in a check for $100,000. And they said, we've been behind in our giving a little bit, and we'd like to get caught up. We're so excited about what's going on in the church. I thought, oh, that's wonderful. That is such a great affirmation of the system. Notice I did not say anything about pressure or asking or targets or anything of that nature. It was identification, and then it was engagement. And you can bet that that pastor began and ended those meetings with prayers about discerning God's will in their life. And it worked. This is not a random process. This is the science of running a successful capital campaign. And it results in us raising more money than I had ever thought imaginable, and joyfully. Annual giving goes up and morale increases as well. So please steal all these ideas and implement these right now. Now, if you want a wealth research firm, my favorite, I've hired many over the years. The person's name is Brian Lacey. We do not, our financial relationship with the Brian Lacey organization is we recommend them or we hire them ourselves when we get permission from a church. You may do the same thing and bypass us entirely. You don't even have to tell them how you found out about Brian Lacey, but I recommend them because they're high quality. So we have a whole bunch of experts that we work with, and I could give you recommendations on all kinds of experts that could help you, particularly you denominational leaders, to make your congregations a greater success. Matter of fact, I remember the Diocese of Denver, we did a series of webinars just like this for the Diocese of Denver, just to help them with their churches prepare for capital campaigns. And we can do the same thing for you as well. Doesn't take much time, doesn't cost anything, and for us, it is a great joy. The next concrete step that you've got to start thinking about right now is your feasibility study. I've had 4 surgeries in my life, and none of them were fun. But boy, this is just like an x-ray before surgery. You really want to know what you're facing before you leap into action. So please do this. It does cost money. It does take time. It takes about 6 weeks, and the normal fee is $14,000. If you want to hire us to do this, we will come give you, as I showed you, this proposal, which walks through all of the details, what happens, so you'll know exactly what it looks like. We'll show you sample feasibility studies so you can see the huge volume of data that you get. It is a 70-page report, and you discover things like who might be wonderful volunteers to lead this? How should we proceed? What problems might we encounter? How much money can we raise? Now, your campaign plan proceeds from the feasibility study. So without a feasibility study, you're flying blind, which I do not recommend. That is scary. So, okay, forgive me, Meredith, you got a question.
I do. I'm just looking at the timeline here, and I know this particular webinar is specifically focused on preparing for a fall campaign. So I'm just wondering, on behalf of the people who are attending or who may be watching this afterwards, is it too late now to get started for a campaign in the fall if we need to do this feasibility study, or when is really kind of like the last ditch time in the year that you can get started in order to have a fall campaign?
Well, Meredith, thank you. That's really a good question. If you want to do a fall capital campaign, you probably need to start in pretty quickly. June is when I would recommend. By the end of July, for sure. If you haven't got something in motion by August, it's going to be really tough to have a commitment Sunday in the fall. Now, we have done it, but there is a momentum. And I think fall is the best time to have a capital campaign. Again, some of the research we've stolen from the secular world, in the world of retail, and in the world of secular fundraising. Approximately half of all revenue comes in the Thanksgiving to Christmas window. So whether you're selling gifts or you're raising money for a charity, that November-December window really will define the success or failure of your entire year. So we like to take advantage of that economic momentum. So my recommendation, if you're thinking about doing a capital campaign in the next year, think about doing it this fall and getting moving immediately. Now, you could do a feasibility study in less than 6 weeks. We've done them in 3 weeks, but that's really a full court press. That is a sprint. Think of your own church and attendance patterns. They tend to go up at the end of August, the beginning of September, corresponding with the return to school. And that's when we kind of define the beginning of the church year is in the fall. And think of the liturgical calendar as well. You know, there are 2 peaks, Christmas and Easter. Let's take advantage of the Christmas momentum as well. So there are spiritual reasons and there are concrete financial reasons as well. But if you're thinking about doing it in the next year, the stock market is a big reason, and the year end is another big reason to begin. Now, let me shift to the next slide to talk about what's a capital campaign for your church calendar of activities look like. You know, begin with consensus on the plan. Hire somebody like Jennifer Gutierrez to facilitate your consensus building activities so that there's cohesion in your direction. As you're doing that, begin your research. Who historically has been in your top 100 donors? Who has the potential to be in that top 100 strata of donors? And then, you know, under 2B, find ways to engage them even before the campaign begins. And we have found that Zoom has actually kind of made our lives easier. I can hold a meeting next week and send out an invitation to 10 people, and half of them will attend. And if I say the pastor needs your advice on a couple of questions, can you make it at this time? Click on this Zoom link to join us. And I've found success. This is a way to engage those people early on. Now, under 2B, this lead donor engagement, this episodic volunteer opportunity, they probably don't want to serve on a committee, but they would be happy to give the pastor advice. When they're in that setting, they conceive of themselves as a volunteer. Therefore, their giving is going to be 11 times higher than if they had not been invited to the dialogue. The worst possible circumstance is if we prepare a beautiful brochure and thought everything through and hand it to them and say, give. That's the worst circumstance. The best circumstance is we've got a challenge and we're beginning to formulate a plan. Could you give us some input? That's the best circumstance, so that then they own it. So you're beginning engagement early on, then you do your feasibility study. That results in this capital campaign plan for your church. As you examine a capital campaign plan, and I would happily share with you a sample feasibility study where you can see those answers and you can see a plan emerge, you will see this theme, this episodic volunteer opportunity theme emerge over and over again. It's targeted at that outer 85%. We want to move them from being a modest giver to a significant, generous giver. And we know the way to do that is through connecting them. From the Protestant world, there's a researcher named George Barna, and he's the one who coined the term church shopping and identified the decline of denominationalism as a church selection criteria for people who were church shopping, and found out that the social aspect now exceeds the theological aspects. So people are looking for a community. That is the driving need. So we want to design episodic volunteer opportunities so they have a significant social component. So it's a fun, exciting, interesting experience in which a person can make new friends and have their social needs met. And what we find is that their giving goes up immediately and it does not go back down. And furthermore, we look at this as a leadership development opportunity because they volunteer and they never go back. They never go back to being uninvolved. So it is just a delightful way to think about building the well-being of your church as a healthy organization. My undergraduate degree was in organizational development. And what we're really talking about is building the strength of an organization that is going to survive and thrive for the next 100 years. Corresponding with these real pragmatic activities, we're going to begin the immediate stewardship education that's going to be based in prayer, so that it's not a surprise when it comes time to give. So we're going to begin with sermon, lay speakers, information sent out through the normal email methods and paper, but we're also going to do social media and video that highlight our lay speakers. We have a 20-year longitudinal study from a group of 100 churches in Wichita that only did this activity, lay speakers on stewardship education. Over the course of this study, giving went up by 100%, from 1.2% of per capita income to 2.4% of per capita income. So really it's an apples to apples comparison, measuring the impact of one single variable. The lay speakers, so we know that it works. It worked for them, it can work for you. And it's very fun. It's extremely fun to do as well. It's a brand new wave of energy. Yes, Meredith, you got another question?
I do. Just kind of going back to the calendar, we hear from a lot of denominational leaders and diocesan stewardship professionals about their frustrations with when parishes in their local communities come to them asking for support or guidance with their capital campaign. What advice would you give for those people who are professionals at the diocesan or the regional leadership level in helping their local congregations really understand the full process of the capital campaign, that it's not just producing a brochure and asking for money, like you said, that it has a more full picture perspective? What would you say to them about that?
Well, thanks, Meredith, because literally I encounter this every single day. I mean, virtually every church I work with. And the people who present that the mindset of, let's just pass out pledge cards, I don't need all the extra stuff. They are part of the 15% who really are saints. They are just lovely people, and they're probably tithers, they're probably volunteers. And the science says that behavior is be called a beamer, behavioral manifestation of internal response. So they're expressing words that describe their internal state. They are totally on board. The mistake is to assume that anyone else is like them. Statistically, we know that 15% of the people are on board. It's the other 85% that we have to worry about. And that understanding only comes from science, the analytics like the ME25 that help us better understand. So it's not conjecture, it's not anecdotal, it is real hard science. So we know that. So we measure every single variable. Point 3 on this slide, if the average professionally run capital campaign, we raise 3 times annual giving. And we keep track of do-it-yourself campaigns, and they raise 50% of annual giving. Now, if that's all you need to raise, well, fine. Forge ahead. If all you need to raise is 50% of annual giving, you don't need a pro. I'll send you a book on how you can do it yourself. Okay, that's this. We've got to share the statistics and resources with them. And we give away our stewardship system book just all the time. So let me know. I'll send 10 to you if you've got a committee that wants to think it through. It would be my absolute pleasure. Now I learned a new word, heuristics. It means rule of thumb. So the general guidelines is, number 1, don't surprise anyone. Begin right now in preparing and laying the groundwork for your fall church capital campaign. Don't surprise anyone. They need to start hearing about it in June, and they need speakers. So social proof is absolutely critical. They can't just hear from one person, or the worst thing, anonymous. There've got to be names and faces associated with that. And that comes from a researcher whose name is Caldini, spelled with a C. And the book is called Persuasion. In the secular world, he has 6 factors that influence people. And the dominant one is social proof. Who is involved? So here is a sample. This is the back of a brochure that's got 100 different names on it of all the different committees. This is social proof. All right, I'm going to stop because I see Meredith. Go ahead, Meredith.
I'm so sorry for continuing to interrupt you with
This is good.
questions, but they're good ones coming in. So we just, as you're talking about the benefits of hiring a professional, we have a question coming in from Doug, who's planning a campaign this fall and is finding some mixed opinions in the board at his parish or his church about the benefits of hiring for a coached or a guided capital campaign, especially concerns related to donors not being excited about the idea that their donations are going to pay for the consultants rather than the actual building project that the campaign is for. So could you just address how Doug and his committee might respond to those concerns related to hiring a professional?
Yes, and thank you. That's just a really good question. And I will invoke an expert. Her name is Charity Kuhn with a K. She works for Emanate Consulting. She is a bank financing expert in loans to churches. And her bank lending committee asks that question. When are you planning a capital campaign to pay back the loan? And are you doing it yourself or are you hiring a professional? And her experience after being in the business of making loans to churches for 20 years, she strongly recommends hiring a professional to do the church capital campaign. She's not part of a church body. This is an independent financial organization that has seen many, many, many church capital campaigns that contribute to a facility expansion or improvement. And her independent awareness is a validation of how important the professionalism in a church capital campaign. So I'll share with you our statistics. People like that can share their perspective. And I would also recommend that the person who asked this question talk to their denominational leaders. We work with many dioceses, Catholic dioceses around the country. And 100% of every diocesan director of stewardship I have spoken with, which is many since I'm a member of the International Catholic Stewardship Council, they all recommend hiring a professional. And it's because they've experienced failure as well. So the way I would proceed is consult your denominational leader and then ask three firms like ours to give you a sales pitch. It doesn't cost anything. It could be done by Zoom. You can get them all done in a couple hours. And that would be an education for that person. So expert opinions is one thing. Looking at the national averages as well. So if you combine all capital campaigns, whether they're church capital campaigns or a secular YMCA or museum or a college, the average cost for a capital campaign is 10%. That means $1 is spent for every $10 that is raised. That's the national average. We don't charge 1%. We're not allowed to charge 1%. That is contrary to our professional code of ethics. We provide a firm bid in advance that we have never, not one singular time, exceeded. That's how this effort unfolded. That's the financial relationship there. And I'm going to bet that the competitors who are also in this business abide by the same rules. They present a bid and then they stick by it no matter what happens. And we've been through many, many capital campaigns and we know what is going to happen. So you bring up a good concern. It is a rational decision. We're going to raise more money and have better outcomes if we go professional. Now, we only have a couple more minutes, and I would welcome, please interrupt if more questions come up. But I was going to move towards concluding with this number one secret to stimulate giving, and that is finding ways to engage people in episodic volunteer opportunities. And we're with a church for 3 years after we complete their church capital campaign. We are with them on a quarterly basis and sometimes on a monthly basis. And this is one of the things that we encourage. Find a way every single month we can invite those 85% who are not sitting on a committee and not very active to get involved in a little way. Maybe it's for half an hour or complete a survey or participate in a Zoom meeting, because we know there's a direct correlation between the episodic volunteer opportunity and their giving. And we want to stimulate that. Our ultimate goal is that people become aware that all their blessings come from God and are meant to flow through them, not meant to be accumulated, but we're meant to be a conduit for God's blessing. And this episodic volunteer opportunity is a real visceral experience that embodies that. It makes it a real thing, and they make friends, and it becomes a fun experience. I know this, I've seen it a million times. So please embrace this and to start thinking now how you at your church can create these episodic volunteer opportunities from now unto eternity. And with the word eternity, I shall shift gears towards wrapping it up. Our next webinar is we're devoted to helping denominational leaders with their job. How can you support local congregations with their church capital campaign? So we'll give you tools. Now, you don't have to be a denominational leader to attend this, but we're going to be set up to give, we have a 10-point checklist for denominational leaders. And what does a local congregation need before they do a church capital campaign? And we give that away for free. If you want that, give me a call. You can attend this. You'll get an email about this. You can attend whether you're a denominational leader or not. But I have a great affinity and many friends who are denominational leaders who address this on a daily basis. And one of our goals is to decrease their anxiety and increase their stress. So I hope you can make it. If you can't make it, sign up and we'll send you the webinar recording. It'll be on our YouTube channel. And to get to our YouTube channel, just go to church-development.com. We've got many, many, many videos that exist just to help educate you to be a success in your church. The role of church in society today is absolutely critical. And after discipleship, stewardship is the most important thing in a person's faith journey. And that is why we exist. All right, Meredith, any last comments before we wrap it up? Okay, hearing none.
Sorry, there I am.
Any last questions before we go?
Yeah, no, I think that we answered all questions. I appreciate everybody chiming in with their questions and comments too about their campaigns and what they're planning for this next year. It looks like there's some people that are planning some fall projects. So please reach out to us if there's anything that we can do to support you with being successful with those. Dennis shared kind of our approach and our philosophy about stewardship and fundraising. And so hopefully that gives you kind of a good idea of where we stand and how we run our campaigns and the success that we find with them. And as Dennis mentioned, we have a lot of resources on our website that are available for free download. There's guides, there's checklists for how to get your stewardship ministry up and running, and lots of videos as well for more helpful information about growing giving in your church or parish and preparing for a capital campaign. So thank you so much again for joining us. Thank you, Dennis, for your wisdom and expertise.
Hold on, one more thing. I got an innovation. I worked at a church in Colorado Springs, and one of our volunteers was a guy named Tom Neppel. And he volunteered. He was a machinist. He runs a sophisticated machine shop. And he said, look, why don't I make some gifts to give away to our donors? And this is this real simple, it's a votive candle with you can hang it on a nail. And he says, I'll give it to you. Do you think anybody would like it? I said, well, let's offer this. Let's give this as a way. And we introduced it halfway through the capital campaign, halfway through the commitment process. And we had a surge of donors respond just to get the doodad. And that just sort of blew my mind. It gave me a better understanding of that outer 85%. And the name of his company is Thomas Peter Design. And I thought, that's just so fun. I feel like I'm still learning things, even though I'm old and I've been through this 100 times. I still find innovation with just about every single capital campaign that we do. So anyway, be innovative, go forth. Good luck and God bless. And thank you, Meredith.
Thank you. Have a good one, everyone.
All right, bye-bye.